Our story begins in a time of hardship for the Israelites, who were suffering under the heavy rule of the Philistines for 40 long years. In the small town of Zorah lived a man named Manoah from the tribe of Dan, and his wife, who had no children and had long accepted her barrenness. But one day, something miraculous happened. A messenger from God, an angel, appeared to her with astonishing news. "You may be barren now," the angel said, "but soon you will conceive and give birth to a son. You must avoid wine, fermented drinks, and anything unclean, for this child is to be set apart for God from birth. His hair must never be cut, for he will be a Nazirite, dedicated to God. He will be the one to begin rescuing Israel from the Philistines." Filled with wonder and excitement, she ran to find Manoah and tell him the unbelievable news, eager to understand what this meant. Manoah prayed earnestly, asking God to send the angel again to guide them on how to raise this child. God answered his prayer, and the angel returned to give them further instructions. Manoah, in awe, asked the angel, "When your words come true, how should we raise this child? What rules should we follow for his life and work?" The angel reminded him of the instructions. His wife must follow everything she had been told. In time, just as promised, Manoah's wife gave birth to a son, and they named him Samson. As Samson grew, God's blessing was clearly upon him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir within him while he was in Mahanadan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. As a young man, Samson journeyed to Timnah, where he noticed a young Philistine woman. Returning home, he told his parents, "I've seen a woman in Timnah among the Philistines. Get her for me as my wife." His parents were dismayed, urging him to find a wife from their own people rather than among the Philistines. "Isn't there someone among your relatives or our people?" they pleaded, but Samson insisted, "Get her for me. She's the one I want." They couldn't know that this was part of God's plan to create a reason to confront the Philistines. On his way to Timnah, Samson suddenly encountered a young lion on a narrow path, surrounded by dense forest. As he made his way through the brush, a fierce roar split the air, testing Samson's courage and strength in a way he'd never expected. A young lion, fierce and wild, suddenly charged towards Samson. In that instant, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, filling him with a surge of divine strength. Without hesitation, Samson met the beast's attack and tore it apart with his bare hands, as easily as one might tear a young goat. The lion lay in pieces, a shocking testament to the strength flowing through Samson. But he chose to keep this feat a secret, saying nothing to his father or mother. Sometime later, as Samson returned to Timnah to marry the Philistine woman, he passed by the place where he'd killed the lion. He turned aside, curious to look at the remains. To his surprise, he found a swarm of bees and honey nestled within the carcass. Scooping out the honey, he tasted it and ate as he continued on his way. When he rejoined his parents, he shared the honey with them, and they too enjoyed it. But he still kept his secret. They had no idea the honey had come from a dead lion. At the wedding feast in Timnah, Samson was feeling bold and decided to test his 30 Philistine companions with a riddle. "Let me tell you a riddle," he announced with a grin. "If you solve it within the 7 days of the feast, I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't solve it, you'll owe me the same." "Tell us the riddle," they replied eagerly, sensing a challenge. Samson said, "Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet." For 3 days they puzzled over his words, unable to figure out the answer. On the 4th day, desperate and frustrated, they went to Samson's wife and demanded, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle to us, or we'll burn down your father's household. Did you invite us here to take our possessions?" Frightened, Samson's wife broke down and threw herself at him, sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You gave my people a riddle, but you won't tell me the answer." Samson tried to reassure her, saying, "I haven't even told my own parents. Why should I tell you?" But she continued crying and pleading through all 7 days of the feast, wearing down his resistance. Finally, on the 7th day, Samson gave in and told her the answer. She immediately passed it along to her people. Just before sunset on the 7th day, the Philistine men approached Samson with a triumphant smile and said, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Angered, Samson realized what had happened. "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer," he said bitterly, "you would never have solved my riddle." Then once more, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson. Enraged and seeking justice, he journeyed to Ashkelon, where he struck down 30 men, took everything from them, and gave their clothes to those who had solved his riddle. But his anger only grew, and he returned home, burning with frustration. Meanwhile, without his knowledge, Samson's wife was given away to one of his companions who had attended him at the wedding feast. Sometime later, during the wheat harvest, Samson returned with a young goat as a gift, hoping to visit his wife. "I'm here to see my wife," he said eagerly. But her father blocked his way, explaining, "I was certain you hated her, so I gave her to your... I was certain you hated her, so I gave her to your companion. But her younger sister is more beautiful. Why not take her instead?" Stunned and hurt, Samson replied, "This time, I have the right to take action against the Philistines, and I intend to make them pay." With determination, Samson went out, capturing 300 foxes and tying their tails together in pairs. To each pair, he fastened a torch, then set them loose, lighting the torches as they scattered through the fields of the Philistines. Flames blazed across the crops, vineyards, and olive groves. The smell of burning grain filled the air as the Philistines watched helplessly, their entire harvest destroyed. "Who did this?" the Philistines demanded, furious and desperate. "It was Samson, the Timnite's son-in-law," came the reply, "because his wife was given to another." Enraged, the Philistines went to her father's house and burned it to the ground, killing Samson's wife and her family. Furious, Samson declared, "If this is how you choose to act, I won't rest until I've avenged this." He launched a fierce attack, striking down many Philistines before retreating to a cave in the rock of Edom. The Philistines, hungry for revenge, gathered their armies and camped near Lehi in Judah. When the people of Judah saw the Philistine army encamped nearby, they asked, "Why are you here to fight us?" The Philistines responded, "We've come to capture Samson and repay him for what he's done to us." Then 3,000 men from Judah gathered their courage and went down to the cave in the rock of Edom, where Samson was hiding. They confronted him, saying, "Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? What have you done to us?" Samson replied calmly, "I only did to them what they did to me." But the men of Judah had come with a purpose. "We're here to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines," they told him. Samson looked at them and asked, "Promise me you won't kill me yourselves." They agreed, saying, "We'll only tie you up and deliver you to them." They bound him tightly with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock, prepared to hand him over to the enemy. As they approached Lehi, the Philistines saw him and came running, shouting in triumph. But at that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson. The ropes binding his arms suddenly snapped, disintegrating like burnt threads, and his hands were free. Spotting the jawbone of a donkey nearby, he seized it and, filled with divine strength, defeated 1,000 Philistine men. When the dust settled, the ground was strewn with the bodies of his enemies, and Samson stood victorious, holding the jawbone in his hand. In triumph, he declared, "With a donkey's jawbone, I've made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have defeated 1,000 men." When he finished, he cast the jawbone aside, and the place became known as Ramath Lehi, or Jawbone Hill. Exhausted and parched from the battle, Samson cried out to the Lord, "You've given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of these uncircumcised enemies?" Hearing his plea, God opened a hollow in the ground at Lehi, and water poured forth. Samson drank deeply, and his strength returned, reviving him completely. That spring became known as Enhakore, and it remains in Lehi to this day. Sometime later, Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a beautiful woman and decided to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza heard that Samson was there and devised a plan to capture him. They surrounded the place, waiting quietly all night by the city gate, murmuring to each other, "At dawn, we'll catch him." But Samson had no intention of waiting until dawn. At midnight, he rose, walked to the city gates, and with incredible strength, tore them from their posts, along with the bar, and carried them away, leaving the stunned Philistines in his wake. With a display of almost unimaginable strength, Samson lifted the massive gates of the city, hoisted them onto his shoulders, and carried them up to the hill that overlooks Hebron. It was a bold act, a testament not only to his sheer power, but also to his defiance against the Philistines. But sometime later, Samson's heart turned to softer pursuits when he fell in love with a woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. Her allure caught the attention of the Philistine rulers, who saw an opportunity and approached her with a tempting offer. "Find out the secret of his great strength, the weakness that would let us overpower him and make him vulnerable," they told her. "Each one of us will reward you with 1,100 pieces of silver." Enticed by the promise of wealth, Delilah agreed. She turned to Samson and asked, "Tell me, what makes you so strong? How could anyone bind and defeat you?" With a playful smile, Samson teased her. "If I were tied with 7 fresh bowstrings, ones that had never dried, I'd be as weak as any other man." Soon, the Philistines brought her the bowstrings, and she bound him with them. Hidden men waited, ready to strike. "Samson," she cried, "the Philistines are here." But with a mere flex of his muscles, he snapped the bowstrings as if they were threads catching fire. Disappointed, Delilah tried again. "You made a fool of me, Samson. You lied. Tell me, how can you be bound?" Patiently, Samson continued his game, saying, "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on the loom and pin it down, I'll be as weak as any man." Later, while he slept, Delilah wove his braids into the loom and pinned it tight. Again she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are here." Yet once more he awoke and pulled out the pin, breaking free. Frustrated and hurt, Delilah confronted him. "How can you say you love me when you refuse to trust me?" Her persistence wore him down, day by day, until he finally revealed his secret. "No razor has ever touched my head. I've been dedicated to God as a Nazirite since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I'd be as weak as any other man." Realizing he'd revealed the truth, Delilah sent word to the Philistine rulers, who returned with silver in hand, ready to claim their victory over Samson at last. As Samson lay asleep on Delilah's lap, she signaled for a man to shave off his 7 braids. With each cut, his power drained away, and his incredible strength left him. Delilah called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke, ready to free himself as he'd done before. But this time, he felt a terrible weakness. He did not know that the Lord's presence had left him. The Philistines seized him, gouging out his eyes before taking him to Gaza, where they bound him with heavy bronze shackles and forced him to grind grain in prison. But as the days passed, his hair began to grow back, a subtle sign of the strength he once had. Meanwhile, the Philistine rulers held a great celebration to honor their god, Dagon, for delivering their enemy into their hands. They cheered, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, to us, the one who ravaged our land and defeated so many of our people." In high spirits, the crowd demanded, "Bring Samson out to entertain us." And so, Samson was brought out, humiliated and bound, to stand before the crowds in the temple. Positioned among the pillars, Samson whispered to the young servant guiding him, "Put my hands where I can feel the pillars that hold up the temple, so I can lean on them." The temple was packed with men and women, including all the Philistine rulers, and some 3,000 more crowded onto the roof, watching Samson's performance with mocking laughter. In his heart, Samson prayed a final desperate prayer to the Lord. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, give me strength just once more, so I can avenge the loss of my eyes." Bracing himself against the 2 central pillars, his right hand on one and his left on the other, he cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines." With every ounce of strength he had left, he pushed with all his might. The temple shuddered, the pillars crumbled, and the walls collapsed. The ground quaked, filling the air with the screams of the Philistines as the temple came crashing down, killing everyone inside. In his death, Samson defeated more Philistines than he ever had in life. His family later retrieved his body and laid him to rest between Zorah and Eshtaol in his father Manoah's tomb, honoring the man who had fought to his last breath. For 20 years, Samson led Israel, a remarkable yet deeply human figure whose life serves as a powerful reminder that God can use even our flaws to fulfill his plans. Samson's strength was legendary, but so were his struggles. His story teaches us about the importance of faith, the pull of temptation, and above all, the sovereignty of God's will. Despite his weaknesses, Samson's life fulfilled a divine purpose, showing that no matter our own imperfections, we too have a place in God's story. Do you dream of sharing the Bible in a way that children and families worldwide can easily understand and enjoy? Here's your opportunity to make that dream a reality. Imagine full-length animated movies that bring Bible stories to life, all leading up to Jesus. It's the kind of content you won't find in mainstream media. Every one of our Bible-based movies is freely available on YouTube, made accessible to everyone, everywhere. But ad revenue alone can't sustain this mission. By joining our community on Patreon, you can help us bring these incredible Bible stories to the next generation. Plus, you and your family will enjoy exclusive perks as a thank you for your support. Thank you for being part of this amazing mission. If you loved this video, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest releases, and be sure to like, comment, and share this video with family and friends. We're excited to have you with us on this journey to share the Bible with the world.